At the beginning of 2025, I was contacted by Jaimungal, who proposed an interview. I accepted and prepared this video for him. The interview was planned for February. If anybody can get in touch with him, you will find his mail address in the text part joining this video. I present myself. I am French. We are in April 2025 and I am 88. I am a former research manager in the French Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique. I belong to the Observatory Marseille, which has disappeared today and was transformed in the laboratory of astrophysics in Marseille, in the south of France. Well, I warn you, the content of this video has been created mainly for scholars and not for popular public. I promise I will make a more simple video soon. Anyway, I have also produced a lot of comic books with free download translated in 40 languages, which gives to me 600,000 readers over all the world. Among those comic books, there is a new one called Janus Model Against Dark Science. You will find the download address in the text part joining this video. On this image, may I present my favorite character, the glamorous Sophia. My cosmological model boils down to introducing elements of negative mass and energy into cosmology and physics. Negative energy states are not supported by quantum theory. The quantum inversion operators are P, space inversion operator, T, time inversion operator. They can be arbitrarily chosen as linear and unitary or antilinear and anti-unitary. Quantum theory of fields is based on the arbitrary hypothesis that there are no negative energy states. This will be ensured if P is linear and unitary and if T is antilinear and anti-unitary. But let's consider the other hypothesis when T is linear and unitary, as shown in 2022 by the Belgian mathematician Nathalie de Berg. The Dirac equation and the Schrödinger equations gives negative energy states naturally arise when the time inversion operator becomes linear and unitary. Notice that the probability of such states is the energy divided by the mass. So if we want a probability positive, and if E is negative, then the mass must be negative. And we have to think about the possibility to deal with negative masses. This was investigated in 1957 by the Austrian cosmologist Hermann Bondi. Consider the fundamental hypothesis of the general relativity, the Einstein equation. If we introduce masses in this equation, it brings an answer, the direction of the forces and the forces law in the so-called Newtonian approximation. If we put two positive masses together, we get that, and the action-reaction principle is satisfied. Now, when Bondi put two negative masses together, he got that. The action-reaction principle was still satisfied. When a negative mass and a positive mass were put together, this principle was no longer satisfied. This is the well-known paradox called runaway. 67 years ago, the conclusion was that negative masses could not be included in the general relativity model. The solution is to shift to some sort of bimetric model. This was attempted by Sabine Hossenfelder in 2008, including some sort of anti-gravity. Then, as she has two kinds of matters, she has two different metrics involved in a two-field equation system. Two first members are very similar to the first member of the Einstein equations. In this last, it comes from the presence of the Ricci scalar in the action integral. In the system of Sabine Hossenfelder, you have two metrics, so that you have two Ricci scalars. And from the action, the variational calculation provides the two first members of these two equations. But the difficulty is to choose the action in order to define the right parts of the two equations. In her approach, Sabine Hossenfelder unfortunately did not succeed to eliminate the physical paradox. She concluded that this rise of paradoxical situation was closely related to the bimetric approach. That was not true. In 2014, more careful building of the interaction terms provided a system of two coupled field equations with satisfaction of the physical principles. In the second members, the capital letters K represents interaction tensors. Their structure is determined by the mathematical Bianchi conditions. Like in the Einstein equation, like in general relativity, the Newtonian approximation can be applied. In such condition, we consider only the following terms. For the field terms, capital T and capital T bar, we have just the terms 0, 0 equal to the positive energy content and negative energy content. In this system, if we introduce two positive masses, we get that. If we consider the interaction between two negative masses, they mutually attract. It comes from the presence of the providential minus sign in the right part of the second equation. Now let's introduce two masses with opposite signs. We then find they mutually repel. The action-reaction principle is saved. We can do physics with that stuff. And again, this is due to this magic minus sign in the second part of the second equation. Thanks to this tip, we have succeeded to introduce negative masses in cosmology. And now we're just to shift from Einstein equation to a system of two coupled field equations. But now the good question is, what kind of physics can we make with such a mixture? Does it fit observation? Look at the forces. Positive and negative masses mutually repel, so that if there are positive masses somewhere, negative masses must be absent. What happens to the system of the two equations? That's how the system looks like now. Well, we concentrate on the first equation that refers to the positive masses. We forget the second one. Wait a minute, this is nothing but the Einstein equations. The conclusion is that the Einstein equation would be the approximation of the two-field equation system when the positive mass is only present. As a conclusion, the system fits all the local relativistic observational data, advance of the perihelion of Mercury, deflection of the light, and so on. Now, let's go back to the lambda CDM model, to the interpretation of the data by the presence of unknown components with positive mass. We immediately notice that those invisible components are much more important than the visible positive mass. Similarly, the negative mass will be also very important. If we introduce FLRW metric forms in the system, we get an exact solution. The two curvature index K and underlined K are equal to -1. The two folds have negative curvature. The mathematical consistency of the systems requires a peculiar equation, this one. We find a new extended law. This is the generalized conservation of the energy among the two folds. This law corresponds to the matter-dominated era when the pressures are neglected. In the radiative era, we get this law. Now, what is the impact on the dynamics of the positive masses? Its expansion is accelerated and it fits perfectly with the available data. Negative mass runs the acceleration of the expansion. This mysterious black energy is nothing but the kinetic energy of the negative mass due to the thermal movements. This coupling occurs in the two folds. Each fold has its proper Janus time with respect to its own gravitational instability. As the negative volumic mass is much stronger than the positive volumic mass, the Janus time is much shorter in the negative spaces. The negative mass thus forms a quasi-regular distribution of spheroidal clusters. On the figures, the green objects. The positive mass is then confined to the remaining space and acquires a lacunar structure similar to donut soap bubbles. The adjacent clusters exert a counter pressure on the positive mass, eating it up. This rapid rise in temperature is followed by an equally rapid fall due to radiative dissipation of the energy from positive mass arranged in flat plates. This destabilized matter and leads to the formation of galaxies and first stars during the first 100 million years. This phenomenon explains why the James Webb Space Telescope found fully formed spiral galaxies as young as 300 billion years. My cosmological model predicts that all galaxies form in the first 100 million years. Residual negative mass seeps between galaxies and confines them. Above, confinement by vast halos of positive mass, dark matter, whose mass density is 10 to the power 21 to 10 to the power 20 kilograms per cubic meter. Below, the same effect due to a gap corresponding to its negative image in negative mass distribution with a similar absolute value of volumic mass. All these effects are greatest along segments joining three of cells and at points where four negative clusters combine their effects. Along those segments, the galaxy will form filaments. Where those filaments join, galaxy clusters will be located where the confinement effect will be also more intense. In a video, Sabine Hossenfelder declared that this system could not exist due to the gravitational instability that would immediately give rise to negative mass galaxy inside such environment. But she is once again blinded by the idea of an automatic symmetry between the two components. If we calculate the Janus time with the density of matter in negative mass, we find that it is equal to the age of the universe, so this system does not evolve. Same thing for the clusters at the center of the large voids for another reason. They can be compared to giant protostars made of anti-hydrogen and anti-helium. Since the amount of energy to be evacuated grows as a cubic power of the radius, and the surface of the radiator as a square, the corresponding cooling time exceeds the age of the universe. So that fusion cannot take place in such objects, and they do not form galaxies, stars, planets, and life is absent over there. And now we come to the problem of the spiral structure of galaxies. For astrophysicists today, it remains a complete mystery. They know neither why this structure is formed, nor what it is maintained. Worse, when they introduce the structures in their simulation as initial conditions, they dissipate in few turns. 30 years ago, when my model had not been extended to the relativistic domain and existed only heuristically, I found this structure appeared at the very moment of the birth of the galaxy as a mode of transfer of momentum to the benefit of the negative mass environment. This film was made in 1992 with 2,000 points of positive mass and 2,000 points of negative mass. As you can see, a barred spiral galaxy is formed in just few revolutions and is maintained for 40 revolutions. The braking is intense in the first few turns, but then becomes very weak. This shows that spiral structures are formed in the very moment galaxies are formed and will last indefinitely. I tried to publish this at the time, but the paper was universally rejected with the same response: sorry, we don't publish speculative works. After years of failure, I decided to concentrate on the relativistic and geometric form of the model. Anyway, it brings the answer. This phenomenon is a mode of transfer of momentum to the benefit of the surrounding negative mass, not through close-to-close collisions, but through the action of gravitational field created by density waves. Creating the spiral structure without another medium with which to interact the mass of the galaxy is like trying to create waves while forgetting the wind. By the way, negative mass produce all the effect in curt.toe attributed to dark energy and dark matter. In the vicinity of the galaxy and clusters, it reproduces similar effect in light rays, in the sense that negative gravitational lensing effect created by negative mass translates in a gap into the concentration of rays. As this negative matter only interacts with positive mass through antigravitation, it doesn't hinder the passage of photons, but the negative gravitational lensing effect will, by attenuating the luminosity of the background objects, make it possible to measure the diameter of negative conglomerates. About the negative energy photons it emits, our eyes and telescopes can't pick them up. Negative matter is then totally invisible. What can we say about its nature? Dynamic group theory brings all the answers you could wish for, but it would take too much time to explain that, so that we will send the readers to the 24 pages paper published in the journal, the European Physical Journal C, where all that is explained in great details. How the universe is configured as a twofold cover of a P10 projective space. How it removes the so-called initial singularity, and what kind of answers it brings to the question of the past and the future of the universe. How it goes with the CPT symmetry, which links the two folds. How it translates the matter-antimatter symmetry. How the inversion of the mass and the energy comes from the inversion of the hour of time. How this negative mass represents the primeval antimatter as suggested in 1967 by the Russian Andrei Sakharov, which represents the starting point of my own quest. how my system of two coupled field equations is constructed from an action. I would be delighted to discuss these questions with people like Sabine Hossenfelder, Niall Turok, or Roger Penrose. But here I would like to concentrate on the available data. Everybody knows this image of objects presented as giant black hole. Immediately, we can remark that the central part of such object is very far to be black. No problem, says a specialist. It's just because there is a hot cloud just in front. But it seems there is another problem. Take, for an example, M87. The axis of the object is parallel to the axis of the galaxy. And we have discovered that that was very common. So that how could such objects could be produced by accretion process? I suggest we go back to observational data. At the bottom, we have a chromatic coding that gives a temperature equivalent. Also, we know that this emission is not thermal in nature, but due to synchrotron radiation. But it gives us the ratio of maximum and minimum wavelength. In the first object, we find a ratio close to 3. Now let's move on the second object. Look at it at the center of the galaxy, the Milky Way. Also 1,000 times lighter and twice as hot. We can see that a cloud of hot gas with a temperature of not 1.8 but 4 billion degrees has placed in front of it just to have exactly the same value 3. What a coincidence! Is that coincidence due to chance, or is it systematic? And if it is systematic, what kind of an object could present a gravitational redshift effect, giving the ratio of the wavelengths precisely equal to 3? If we refer to the second paper Karl Schwarzschild published in February 1916, just before his death, it was that we might call a Schwarzschild body, where the force of gravity is balanced by the rise of pressure at the center, which is due to the speed of light soaring, if not to infinity, at least to a very high value. How would such object have formed? It's a question we keep working on. And how would they maintain this ratio 3 over time? We believe this ratio is established at the very moment of their formation and maintained over time by a mass inversion process. About this mass inversion, see this paper published in Annals Physics in 2023. We predict that all the future images of hypermassive objects at the center of the galaxy will have this ratio 3. Similarly, this phenomenon of mass inversion should limit the mass of the neutron stars to 2.5 solar masses. So black holes of any mass would not exist. This is the first point that makes my model so unpopular among the scientific community. The second reason is that the distances in the negative sector are 100 times shorter, while the limit of velocity, the velocity of negative energy photons, is 10 times higher, so that if a vehicle could manage the inversion of its mass, making it invisible to observers, and travel in the negative sector, its travel time should be divided by 1,000. Thus, this would make the journeys to systems with the potential to harbor intelligent life no longer impossible.